Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Zach on Sports. I am your host, Zach Gershman. Today, I am here in Center City, Philadelphia with a very special guest, the 45th Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, former Mayor of Philadelphia, and arguably one of the most recognizable Philadelphia sports fans there is, the Honorable Ed Rendell.
Hey Zach, how are you?
I'm doing good. Governor Rendell is also an author of the book A Nation of Wusses, which I have right here. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And he's also a regular on the Philadelphia Eagles post-game live on NBC Sports Philadelphia. So, Governor, I want to focus on the state of Philadelphia sports and sports moments that happened while you were in office, and maybe have a question or two about politics and sports.
Sure.
So, you were a student. You've lived in Philadelphia ever since you were a student at University of Pennsylvania.
Right. I grew up in New York City, and interestingly, when I was in high school, I played football. I wasn't all that good, but my team was excellent. And the New York papers, one of them, the New York Journal-American, hired me to be a reporter. I'd have to call in the scores of the game and the information about the game at the end of the game. And it appeared in the newspaper with a tiny little byline. So I did what you did. Of course, there was no internet then, but I would get on the phone after the game and I'd say we won 28-7. The star was Paul Seegert, our quarterback, who completed 15 passes out of 23 with 306 yards. There were 4 touchdowns, 3 pass touchdowns, 1 run. So I'd report that in, and it would be in the paper the next day. So I admire what you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So you're obviously very familiar with the Philadelphia sports fan. What is it about Philadelphia sports fans that are so different and so special compared to other fan bases?
Well, first of all, they're very knowledgeable. They know the games. They know football. They know baseball. They know basketball. They didn't know hockey when the Flyers first came to town, but they've learned hockey. So they're knowledgeable fans, and they're fans that are pretty hard to lead astray. They understand when someone's giving effort and not giving effort. They understand when a manager's making good moves or not making good moves. So that's number one. They're very smart. Number two, they're very passionate. We stand behind our teams generally through thick or thin. The teams have a good fan base, and Eagle fans, I remember I've been an Eagles season ticket holder for 35 years, and there's never been a time that the Eagles weren't sold out, including years when they were 4-12, 3-13. I remember some really rough years before Dick Vermeil became our coach, and the fans just kept coming. They're not like you go to L.A. and L.A. has a brand new football team, the Rams, and the Rams play in a stadium, and the Rams were good this year, and the stadium's 2/3 full, 1/3 empty. That would never happen in Philadelphia.
Yes, and thankfully, the Eagles finally won the Super Bowl. The football gods have listened, and the monkey's finally off our back. But the western side of the state won in 06 and 09. What was that like for you personally and politically, honoring and recognizing the Steelers?
It wasn't hard at all, because outside of the Eagles, I was a Steelers fan because I was governor, and it was important to understand that in the Pittsburgh area, western Pennsylvania, fans are just as passionate about the Steelers as we are about the Eagles. So I rooted for the Steelers. I rooted for them in both Super Bowls that they played in while I was governor. My dream was to see the Eagles play the Steelers in the Super Bowl. And then, you know how governors have bets between the governors of the various states. Well, I would have bet myself in an Eagles-Steelers game. I would have gone on TV and made a bet up to myself.
It would have been a good bet for you to win.
That would have been a good bet. I could lose. But, no, it's interesting. If you just look back a few short years, the Philadelphia sports scene was the Pets. I mean, we hadn't won anything. The Sixers were awful. The Eagles were bad. The Phillies were woeful. The Flyers were hanging around but never really quite made it in the playoffs. There were a couple of years where none of our teams made the playoffs. Now, look at what's changed in a few short years. We're the Super Bowl champs of the world in football.
That gives me chills.
Absolutely. It was number one on my bucket list, so I'm ready to go. So that's number one. Number two, the Phillies, after winning 66 games last year, are in first place, and it's almost the end of July. It's unbelievable. And for those people who criticize Gabe Kapler, I don't care what he's doing, but it's been an incredible turnaround. The Sixers went from being just the God's worst team when we were tanking to probably the most exciting young team in the NBA. And the Flyers are regrouping, but they're starting to accumulate young, terrific draft choices. So I think their future is pretty bright too. So it's amazing the turnaround that's happened. This is the renaissance for being a Philadelphia professional sports fan.
And to get on a serious note, even though everything is serious, we're on the rise in every aspect. But when politics and sports intersect, you have controversies arise, and as we most recently seen with the national anthem discussion with the NFL. What are your thoughts on the subject, and how do you believe it should be handled?
I think protesting is as American as apple pie. The Constitution, the First Amendment, gives us the right to assemble and speak our grievances. The right to free speech gives us the right to complain. So I think the players have every right to protest. And I think we made much too much of this. Some of the fans made too much of this. President Trump made too much of this. The owners made too much of it. The NFL made too much of it. I think we should let the players express themselves if they want to. Fans can disagree with them, but they should understand that's their right. Every American. President Trump said that players were violating our Constitution. No. To the contrary, the players were vindicating our Constitution, which says we have the right to protest. Let them protest. Who cares? If they disrupted the game, obviously that would be different. But they want to make their feelings known during the national anthem. And by the way, none of the players were dishonoring the military. When President Trump said that, he was, as usual, just flat out lying. The players were complaining about the criminal justice system and saying that in America something should be done about it. I have to agree with that. The criminal justice system has its problems, and the players have every right to complain about it and say it needs to be changed, it needs to be reformed. So let's leave it alone. Let's not make a big deal out of it. What Donald Trump should have done is he had Carson Wentz, our star, and Doug Peterson, our coach, coming down to his ceremony at the White House. If just the two of them stood with him outside of a press conference with 1,000 Eagle fans who had accepted the invitation to come down, it would have been great. What's the big deal? When the Patriots, who Donald Trump gets support from the owner, Robert Kraft, when the Patriots won the Super Bowl the year before, half the players didn't come. Tom Brady didn't come. No one made a big deal about that. So let's just all step back and say players don't lose the rights that they have under the Constitution by being players.
Sports and politics are both very combative, and
Right.
they're definitely not for the weak of heart. If there's one thing I learned from Chip Kelly is that we're from Philly and we fight.
Absolutely.
And so what did you take from being a Philadelphia sports fan that you were able to bring into the world of politics or during your campaigns?
Well, it's interesting. I think the thing you learn in sports is you can't be a fair weather friend. You can't be a sunshine patriot. You've got to stick with your team through thick and thin. And you learn that about politics too. You learn that there aren't always going to be good times. And you're going to lose and you're going to win. And that's true about sports as well. When you lose, you got to shake it off and bounce back. And I lost 2 elections after being successfully elected DA 3 times. I lost my next election for governor, then I lost my next election for mayor. But I didn't give up. I said, look, you still believe in yourself, you're going to bounce back and try it again. Then I won for mayor, was reelected mayor, won the Democratic primary for governor, won the general election for governor, was reelected governor. So you learn that to cope with the losses and to not get too heady about the victories because there's always another election down the road.
When you were, as I mentioned, when you graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, and in your book, you mentioned that, well, first of all, get the book. It's a great book.
It's only $9 on Amazon.
You mentioned how you would always love going to the games at the Palestra. You mentioned that it was your time to be a regular guy at those games. What was it like seeing Penn games and Big 5 games there, and what's your most memorable moment at the Palestra?
Well, there's so many memorable moments in the Palestra. This year's Penn-Harvard Ivy League tournament final game was one of the best basketball games anywhere I've ever seen. But probably my most memorable moment came when I was, I think I was young assistant DA. But as you said, from graduation on, including my undergrad years, I'm a regular at Penn games at the Blastra. Penn was playing Villanova that year, and Villanova was, I think, ranked 8th in the nation, and Penn was nowhere. It was a middle-of-the-road Ivy League school. But they had 2 young sophomore guards, and those were the days when freshmen weren't allowed to play. They had to play freshman ball. So the 2 sophomore guards were in their first season. It was December, so it was maybe the 3rd or 4th game, and Penn was playing Villanova. This is the year before the 35-second clock. So Penn decided to use its 2 guards and hold the ball. Not hold the ball to absurd lengths, but they held the ball and they slowed down the game. And going into the last few moments of the game, it was 30-30. And Villanova shot and missed. Penn got the rebound, called timeout. Penn sets up a play to take the last shot. And Steve Bilski, who later became Penn's athletic director, Steve Bilski is taking a jump shot. The scoreboard, I'll never forget it. I was watching the scoreboard. It said 30-30. It said 3 seconds left when he released the ball. The ball was in the air. Bingo. Went in. Penn upset Villanova 32-30. Probably the most exciting moment, because it was such a huge upset, of any Blastra game I've been in before that or since. And I have someone, a reporter, a sports reporter, sent me a picture. The Daily News had taken a picture of the scoreboard, the ball in flight. The clock at that point was zero, time had run out, and the ball was just about this close to the basket. You could see by its trajectory that it was going in. It was amazing. And I have that shot on my wall at home.
That's awesome. But as I mentioned earlier, you're arguably one of the most recognized Philadelphia Eagles, Philadelphia sports fans. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. My first interview on Zach on Sports when I was in 7th grade was with a man who I believe impersonated you the best, Joe Conklin.
He's a great guy.
What did you think when you heard his impression first, and what do you think of it now?
I thought he did a pretty good job. And no one likes to be caricatured with an impression, because usually they're talking about your weak points rather than your assets. So, but I thought it was funny, and I thought he did a good job. And Joe's a great guy. He does a lot of stuff for charity. A really great guy.
Yeah, he is. He did a show at my middle school. Free. It was an incredible show. We made a whole day out of it. So one last thing. It's a great time to be a Philadelphia sports fan. The Eagles are world champs. The Phillies are fighting. The Sixers are trusting the process, and the Flyers have a lot of young prospects on the rise.
Right.
What message would you give to the young Philadelphia sports fan?
Enjoy these years, because it won't always be this good. The great thing about sports is it's cyclical. Even for a team like the Yankees, people say the Yankees always win. Well, I can show you a 5 or 6 year period where the Yankees never came close to making the playoffs. So sports is cyclical by the very nature of it. The way the drafts are scheduled, etc. The teams that do the best are the lowest on the totem pole when it comes to drafting. So enjoy this, because it's not always going to be this good. And conversely, when we go through bad years, remember, good years are just around the table.
It's awesome. Well, once again, thank you for taking time out of your day to do this interview. I really appreciate it. Guys, go get the book.
Let me say one thing about the book. It's interesting. The title comes from sports. This was, I think, 2009. I was still governor, and the Eagles were on their way to the playoffs. They were playing a home game against the Minnesota Vikings. If they won the game, they would have gotten a home field advantage all the way through the playoffs. Well, the Sunday morning of the game, there was a forecast for 11 inches of snow, a very big snowstorm to hit at game time, which was going to be 4 o'clock. The Eagles and the NFL got together and called the game. They said it's too dangerous for the fans to go down to the stadium. They're calling the game. And the station that I did, Comcast Sportsnet at that time, called me over the phone. I was at home, and asked what I thought about them canceling the game. I said, It's crazy. No one cancels football for bad weather. I mean, football was made to be played in the snow and the cold. The great Ice Bowl with Bart Starr and the Dallas Cowboys was played in 5-degree below weather. San Diego Chargers played an AFC Championship game in Cincinnati against the Bengals, and it was minus 68 degrees wind chill factor. They played the game. Football, I quoted the great movie League of Their Own about baseball. There's no crying in baseball. I said, there's no canceling football games. I said, what do you think they would say in Buffalo or Green Bay?
Or Minnesota.
Or Minnesota or Pittsburgh about canceling a football game for snow. I said, but this is symptomatic of what we become as a nation. When there's 1.5 inches of snow on the ground, everyone cancels school because we become a nation of wusses. And the next day, that comment was in the papers all over the country and even in China, because I quoted a Daily News sports writer who said, if it happened in China, the Chinese would have walked to the game doing advanced calculus on the way. And so that they attributed that quote to me in the Shanghai and Beijing newspapers. So then I was asked by the Washington Times to write an op-ed piece, and I wrote an op-ed piece, and they entitled it Nation of Wusses, and it was on the front page of the newspaper. So when I wrote the book, I had another title in mind, and my publisher said, nope, it has to be called A Nation of Wusses. And they were right, because the title is sort of unusual. It sold a lot of copies, so they were right and I was wrong.
Well, don't be a wuss. Go out and play football in the cold. But once again, thank you for taking time out of your day. I really appreciate it.
And remember, $9 on Amazon.
$9. Get it. Amazon Prime too. Who knows? All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time on Zach on Sports.